Spontaneous revolution. That's the topic. Who's the guest? Oh, nice of you to show up. How you doing?
Hello. I just made some soup.
Honestly, I'm gonna keep it real. I wanted to take a nap right now. I was so close. I could feel the breath of sleepiness on my eyelids, tickling the lashes. Huh? Sorry.
Seize power. Damn it. Just spilled a bunch of soup. It's so heavy. Anyway, nap time will be secured when we see it.
But I can tell you right now, after we do this, to keep it real, I'm probably going to actually have energy and probably want to stay awake, but we'll see. Here we go, the king of the
absolutely correct, Nelson. Communism is when unlimited nap time.
Do you like naps? Become a communist. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. I said I could feel the whisper of a nap on my eyelids.
The nap fairy just whispering on your eye.
Yeah.
You know what? Jokes aside, you kind of could take unlimited breaks in the Soviet Union.
I thought you were going to say, jokes aside, let's all take a nap right now.
Welcome to collecting nap hour.
There's historical precedence for unlimited nap time.
All jokes aside, everybody get your pillows.
That's the topic of today.
We're going to talk about spontaneous nap time.
The great nappers of the revolution.
I'm not cracking into this topic till I see that number hit 20, so you guys can keep sharing. I'm going to keep talking about naps. Anyway, how you doing, Ivan? How you doing?
Spontaneous increase in the numbers.
Yes.
Spontaneous. I feel like that gets of that cat when you look up tired and then it's just like that cat is all fuzzy. He's looking.
I was looking for the background right now and I was yapping with Ivan and Mom, where the hell is this background? I was about to put the most random background on here because I was just too tired. It was going to be like a shoe or something random.
Right, that's right.
I see those numbers climb in. Let's get to 20, guys, please.
Nothing spontaneous.
I cannot deign to speak to less than 20 people.
Oh, goodness.
How's everyone's day going today?
For my soup.
You guys are welcome to comment. I'm talking to y'all. How's everybody's day going?
Pretty good. No? Woke up late. I took a very long nap. So I actually don't need nap time because I slept until noon.
I like how you went pretty good. Woke up late.
And then, I keep rearranging my room because my brain is restless.
I relate to that. I feel like, wait, didn't Ivan just rearrange his room as well?
I think so.
All right.
I've probably rearranged my room 6 times last night alone.
Spontaneous rearranging.
It's quite literally spontaneous rearranging. And, it goes into the topic. Spontaneity doesn't work that well because I had no damn plan. I tried to formulate a plan after I spontaneously started it. And I've almost arranged it back in the way that it was originally. So if there's not a more apt metaphor.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Where did Ivan go? Ivan's all, screw this, I'm going for a nap. What's this fun kit? Live show, guests take turns performing. Countdown for all. Okay. Anywho.
I'm about to turn my camera on, don't worry.
I wasn't worried, dog. I don't know if you guys know this. This is secret insider information, but if you join Collective, you must rearrange your room once a month. Part of the terms and conditions.
You gotta do what?
Rearrange your room.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a given. I don't know if that's communism or that's ADHD. It's one of the two.
Alrighty. You know what? I guess we'll start the topic.
Did you like my boogie?
Your what? Oh, your lighting looks good, dog. What did you say, though? Do I like what?
My boogie. You missed my dancing.
No, I missed it. I was looking at the outline.
Terrible.
So today we're going to talk about spontaneous revolution. And Ivan's going to give us a little kickoff talking about the background of what that means.
The yawn is crazy. That's going to be an iconic moment.
The yawn.
The realness.
Well, it makes sense because spontaneous revolutions don't work. So it'd be kind of a sleepy topic.
Yeah,
Yep, that's alive, everyone. Congratulations. All right, let me pull up my thing here. Make sure I have everything in order. Share this with the ACP.
and all of your enemies. The worst of the worst. Get them in here.
Share this with. I'm not gonna say that.
Share this with Biden.
Yeah, you can share it with Biden. That's fine.
The clicks from the K-Hive.
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 Collective Hive? Is that what you're calling it?
Yeah, I was wondering what K-Hive meant. I was like,
Kamala
that
Harris.
sounds suspect.
Kamala Harris. They call it the K-Hive?
They call it the K-Hive.
But they did?
It doesn't sound real,
I
bro.
didn't know that. That's
Y'all
interesting.
gaslighting me. I know you know this.
I did not know this, actually.
I don't
We're
keep up
shutting
with
it down, guys. We got to go down a rabbit hole.
I got in trouble the other day because
He said
I got in trouble the other day because I said you can't girl your boss your way out of capitalism, and I was told to not be sexist, and I was like, okay.
That's kind of crazy, but okay. I'll say it. You can't girl boss your way out of capitalism.
You can't.
Are we all
right.
good now, people?
Yeah. Okay. So, spontaneous revolution. So basically, in Marxist thought, we obviously, we would never do this for real in real life, but communists believe, Marxists believe in the in revolution and revolutionary struggle. Now, what does that really mean for I want to say even the layman, but I would say even a lot of TikTok communists don't really fully understand what we're saying. So revolution is not just war or civil war. It is the overthrow of the class society, the overthrow of the ruling class. In this case, the ruling class, as we all know at this point, is the bourgeois. It's the rich. It's the 1%. Elon Musk. The other bald one, Jeff Bezos, those kind of people. They exist in the owner class. We exist in the worker, including lumpen, disabled folk, basically everybody who's not ultra wealthy, right? So a revolution is not just the violent takeover. It is the removal of what we call the class antagonisms. So the contradictions that exist between having one group of people who own everything and another group of people who don't own anything. And it's reconciling those differences by force in favor of the worker class, of the proletariat. In some societies, the peasant class. So there's this misinformation or misconception that a revolution can be spontaneous, that it can basically be something that happens when the stars align and you're with your friends at the tavern and you realize after seeing some show tunes, you'll get the reference later, that you can just overthrow the government without really planning it. This is where Marxist-Leninism really comes in, and one of the tenets of the philosophy that we advocate for is the contributions that Vladimir Lenin brought to Marxism really can be, in a nutshell, summarized as the addition of the vanguard party. So Marxist-Leninists believe in, and collectively believes in, the establishment of a vanguard political party. And the reason why we do that, and the reason why it's different from bourgeois politics, is a vanguard party or an organization needs to be established in order to begin to build the infrastructure within a society in order to prepare that society for revolution, not just the taking of power, a civil war, a counter-revolution, and I'm going to go on a limb here and say even a cultural revolution, the revolution of the mind as well, the revolution of all aspects of class society, the changing of human psyche. You can't do that. I mean, I want to say it's almost common sense, right? But you can't do that in a society where everybody who's part of this society has grown up in the exact opposite of the society that you're advocating for. We've all grown up and living under capitalism, which comes with different things like patriarchy, like racism, sexism, ableism. These things, while as comrades we need to unpack and unlearn and remove ourselves from that line of thinking, nobody is absolved from thinking that way. That's just a very minute example of the contradictions that will still exist post-revolution that need to be culturally and societally removed from society. So that's why you need a political apparatus to not only facilitate, like, okay, if we seize the means of production, we take over the factories, we take over military bases or what have you, we take over food, agriculture farms, or in this case, need to build agriculture farms. You not only need a bureaucracy and a government and run by the proletariat to facilitate that, but you need an apparatus in order to facilitate overall social societal change and enforce it. So just simply picking up your pew-pew and running out into Montana is not going to be effective, one, and two, actually very detrimental to revolutionary struggle, especially in the century that we live in. So kind of transitioning out of that intro, we have a pretty decent example of a spontaneous revolution that occurred during the French Commune. Let me make sure I have my thing here. I don't want to read the wrong thing, which I do have the wrong thing, actually. So
that's fine. Go ahead and look for it.
No, are you talking about
No. I have it. I was just out of order, but I have it.
Just to clarify.
Uh-huh.
Are you talking the Paris Commune or like the 1968 Paris?
Paris Commune.
Okay.
Yeah, but let me backtrack a little bit. So I have some words here from Lenin about like what a revolution is that I'll get to in a second. But I just want to say that, like, I forgot the other point, so I'm just going to go jump into this. So basically, so this is from State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin. And here's just a few quotes that I feel like, in a way, kind of summarize what I'm saying. In The Poverty of Philosophy, Marx wrote, "The working class in the course of development will substitute for the old bourgeois society an association which will preclude classes and their antagonisms, and there will be no more political power groups, since the political power is precisely the official expression of class antagonisms in bourgeois society. It is instructive to compare this general exposition of the idea of the state disappearing after the abolition of classes with the exposition contained in the Communist Manifesto, written by Marx and Engels, a few months later in November 1847 to be exact. In depicting the most general phases of development of the proletariat, we trace the more or less veiled civil war raging within existing society up to the point where the war breaks out into open revolution, or where the violent overthrow of the bourgeois lays the foundation for the sway of the proletariat." So I actually want to stop right there and just kind of extrapolate that last little segment. The revolution, again, isn't just something that is just like open pew-pew fighting. It is an ongoing process. It is a flexible process that you could argue has already begun when you have people advocating for it, when you have the contradictions. So, like, this is a great example. We exist in a point right now in a capitalist society where anti-capitalist media is very popular because it makes a lot of money. That is already feeding the seeds towards societal and revolutionary change. Eventually, this contradiction will get so big that the capitalists will try to clamp down on that. And that can also contribute to even further escalation of revolutionary activities. We have seen above the first step in the revolution by the working class is to raise the proletariat to the position of the ruling class to win the battle of democracy. So that's where we kind of talk about the concept of the dictatorship of the proletariat, or dictatorship of the working class, which, sounds cool, but it's difficult to get that phrase past one layman because they hear dictatorship and they get spooked, which I don't blame them. But really all this is saying that when we're talking about revolution, we're talking about now the workers are in charge. And I feel like, yeah, that's a super oversimplification, but I feel like that oversimplification is not made enough, where we are putting our superiority as workers above the owners. We are being authoritative. I am now telling you, it's like that movie with the pirates when the guy's like, I'm the captain now. That's literally what we're saying. Like, no, we're in charge now. The proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degree all capital from the bourgeois, to centralize all instruments of production in the hands of the state. Now, who owns the state? The proletariat. Organize as the ruling class and to increase the total productive forces as rapidly as possible. So I feel like in a nutshell, that's basically what that's basically how you define how Lenin defined his
Cruz, can you mute?
revolution.
I thought
You're washing dishes, bro.
I was hearing a spoon. I think it was eating cereal. We'll talk about it later, though. Go on.
For as sleepy as I am, I'm surprised I perked up this much. But anywho, so okay. So we have an example of a spontaneous revolution. Now I remember a point I was going to make before. So the vanguard, which is, I would say, the main instrument responsible for enacting revolutionary change or the actual seizure of power, the moment or the day that is decided may be spontaneous, but what's not spontaneous is the act of building and moving towards revolution. So there's a difference between, like I said, sitting in the club and deciding you and your homies want to do protracted people's war. In this case, what I'm saying is, as the class antagonisms get worse and worse and worse, and the vanguard, I've already given my opinions in the past about what will happen in the former United States, but as the vanguard establishes more political power, as their contradictions clash continuously with the bourgeois government, there will come a day, the vanguard will be able to have a much broader sense of when the time would be right, so to say. And they might say, okay, it's Tuesday, it might end up being on Thursday. That in itself is spontaneous, but the preparation and the ability to move forces and deploy cadres will not be spontaneous. That is something that needs to be in constant motion. Allegedly. All right. So here we have an example from the Paris Commune, which is basically, I had my ear here and I lost it. I was never good with dates in history. 1870s. So basically, I think this is a good example because while the class antagonisms were occurring in France, so at the time, France was at war with Germany. They were getting their shit rocked, so to say. Paris was essentially under siege. And obviously the ideas of communism were spreading because Marx was alive and doing his thing. And it's particularly popular in France. So what wasn't spontaneous in this case was the beginnings of organizing of people, in France talking about communism and actually, putting boots on the ground and stuff like that. But what was spontaneous was the way that the French at the time went about their revolutionary struggle. In this case, they had determined that during this active war, during these, I think it was like 100,000 or so French soldiers got surrounded by the Germans. Basically, a Ashate of the National Guard who were communists, basically decided to take over the city. And then there was some impromptu elections between different factions. But the main thing that I found that I think is the main lesson here between spontaneity and a planned revolution is that there was much debate about whether or not the provisional government, let's put it that way, of communists should march on Versailles or not. Because if they were able to go to Versailles, they would have been able to establish rule over the entire country. Mm-hmm. And they decided not to. And they decided not to because they wanted to establish a bigger political and legal basis in Paris. Now, in hindsight, it's much easier for me to say than obviously being there. But, again, Paris was already, under siege. The country was already in decline due to this war. In my opinion, if I was the person that I am now who was there at the time, I would have been on the side of we should go to Versailles. Because while that obviously is a very authoritarian action, being able to establish a hold over the entire country as opposed to a city and perhaps politically be able to pull yourself out of the war, which is something we saw later, only a handful of years later with the burgeoning Soviet Russia and pulling out of the war with Germany, that may have actually led to maybe the project lasting longer than it actually did. So this is Lessons of the Commune, 1908, Lenin's collected works. So I'm going to read this, and then I think I pass it on to you, my boy.
You keep yapping. I'm
sleepy. After the coup d'etat, which marked the end of the revolution in 1848, France fell under the yoke of Napoleonic regime for a period of 18 years. This regime brought upon the country not only economic ruin, but national humiliation. In rising against the old regime, the proletariat undertook two tasks, one of them national and the other of class character: the liberation of France from the German invasion and the socialist emancipation of the workers from capitalism. This union of two tasks form of unique features of commune. Actually, this reminds me of a discussion we were having in the collective Discord. DM us if you want to be in a collective Discord. Was that one of the major L's of this time period was that the French and German communists were more interested in continuing the conflict with each other than banding together and liberating each other, which contributes to the idea of them not establishing hold over the country and pulling themselves out of the war. As this is a lesson that we as communists today need to understand, that within the imperial core, the best thing we can do is be anti-war. We do not want to fight wars, international conflicts. We do not want to do that. We want to stop the machine from making more money, from causing more destruction. So whether it's Iran or China, North Korea, whatever, I'm not about it. And you shouldn't be either, because it only benefits the bourgeois and it only kills innocent people, regardless of your personal feelings about how these countries are run. And trust me, you have a lot more in common with those regular people in those countries than you do the bourgeois. The bourgeois had formed a government of national defense, and the proletariat had to fight for national independence under its leadership. Actually, it was a government of national betrayal, which saw its mission in fighting the Paris proletariat. But the proletariat, blinded by patriotic illusions, did not perceive this. The patriotic idea had its origins in the Great Revolution of the 18th century. It swayed the minds of socialists to the Commune and Blanqui, for example. Undoubtedly, a revolutionary and an ardent supporter of socialism could find no better title for his newspaper than the bourgeois cry, "The country is in danger." Combining contradictory tasks, patriotism and socialism, was the fatal mistake of the French socialists. In the Manifesto of International, issued in September 1870, Marx had warned the French proletariat against being misled by a false national idea. The Great Revolution, class antagonism had sharpened, and whereas at the time, the struggle against the whole of European relations united the entire revolutionary nation, Now the proletariat could no longer combine its interests with the interests of the other classes hostile to it. Let the bourgeois bear the responsibility of national humiliation. The task of the proletariat was to fight for socialist emancipation of labor from the yoke of the bourgeois. And indeed, the true nature of bourgeois patriotism was not long in revealing itself. Having concluded an ignominious peace with the Prussians and the Versailles government proceeded to its immediate task. It launched an attack to wrest the arms that terrified from the hands of the Paris proletariat. The workers replied by proclaiming the Commune and the Civil War. Although the socialists was split up into numerous sects, the Commune was a splendid example of unanimity with which the proletariat was able to accomplish the democratic task within the bourgeois could only proclaim. Without any particular complex legislation, in a simple, straightforward manner, the proletariat, which had seized power, carried out demonstrations of social systems, abolished bureaucracy, and made all offices post-elective. So that's true. Despite the criticisms I'm living here about spontaneous revolution, the Paris Commune was able to do some pretty democratic things, such as like rent stabilization, ending child labor, establishing some pretty basic women's rights. My problem is that they didn't think farther ahead than where they got, so it inevitably led to their demise. They only lasted for about 2 months, so like A for effort, but they needed to be more. They needed more than that. They needed to think long term.
They hit a point where you got to ask the question, okay, now what? And because of the spontaneous nature of what happened there to begin with, there is no answer for the now what.
Right.
Right.
It's just kind of on impulse almost. It's passion without purpose or passion without discipline.
Mm.
Yeah. So eventually it fails and reverts back to what was.
Yeah. But two mistakes destroyed the fruits of the splendid victory. The proletariat stopped halfway. Instead of setting about extrapolating the extrapolators, it allowed itself to be led astray by dreams of establishing a higher justice in a country united by common national tasks. Such institutions as the banks, for example, were not taken over. The Proudhon's theories about a just exchange, etc., still prevailed among the socialists. Now, this is another thing where, it kind of goes into the right and left deviations of communism. Lenin here is saying that they did not take over the national banks, and instead the Paris communists were more set on more of like a sort of this idea of like equitable exchange amongst goods and services. Now, that's cool, but the reality is again, when you're shifting from a society that it's not even the entire society, it's just this city, is moving away from a capitalist to a socialist, not even means of production because they didn't really do that. They just established the government. You now changing sort of the idea of how the economy works, even on a local level, without, again, like a prolonged plan, it's going to backfire. It's going to result in economic stagnation. So as much as we talk about, we've at Collective tried to dismiss sort of the classless, stateless, moneyless idea. I hate to break it to you, but money's going to be around for a minute. The second mistake was excessive magnanimity of the part of the proletariat. Instead of destroying its enemies, it sought to exert moral influence on them. It underestimated the significance of direct military operations in civil war, and instead of launching a resolute offensive against Versailles that would have crowned its victory in Paris, it tarried and gave the Versailles government time to gather dark forces and prepare for the blood-soaked week of May. You gotta do what you gotta do, bro. You cannot allow these people. And I'm not talking about indiscriminate, who you think are the bad guys, but like the known bad guys, they gotta, you cannot allow them to go over there and plan, because they're going to plan and they're going to come back in force. The period that precedes the Russian Revolution and prepared its bears a certain resemblance. Did I go too far? No. To the period of the Napoleonic yoke in France. In Russia, too, the autocratic clique that had brought upon the country's economic ruin and national humiliation, but the outbreak of revolution was held back for a long time. Since social democracy I got distracted by a notification. But the outbreak of revolution was held back for a long time, since social development had not yet created the conditions for a mass movement, notwithstanding all the courage displayed to isolated actions against the government in the pre-revolutionary period broke against the apathy of the masses. Only the Social Democrats, by strenuous and systematic work, educated the masses to the level of higher forms of struggle, mass action, and armed civil war. The Social Democrats were able to shatter the now, keep in mind, at the time, the Social Democrat was being referred to as communist. It is not the same thing as it is considered now.
Yeah, the split hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. The Social Democrats were able to shatter the common national and patriotic delusions of the young proletariat, and later, when the manifesto of October 17th had been wrested from the Tsar due to the direct intervention of the proletariat, began vigorous preparations for the next inevitable phase of the revolution. The armed uprising, having shed common national illusion, it concentrated its class focus on its own mass organization, the Soviet workers and soldiers, deputies, etc., and notwithstanding all the differences in the aims and tasks of the Russian Revolution compared with the French Revolution of 1871, the Russian proletariat had to resort to the same methods of struggle at the first used by the Paris Commune, civil war. Mindful of the lessons of the Commune, it knew that the proletariat should not ignore peaceful methods of struggle. They serve its ordinary day-to-day interests. They are necessary in periods of preparation for revolution, but it must never forget in certain conditions the class struggle assumes a form of armed conflict and civil war. There are times when the interests of the proletariat call for the ruthless extermination of its enemies in open armed clash. This was first demonstrated by the French proletariat in the Commune and brilliantly confirmed by the Russian proletariat in the December uprising. And although these magnificent uprisings of the working class were crushed, there will be another uprising in face of which the forces of the enemy of the proletariat will prove ineffective, and from which the socialist proletariat will emerge completely victorious. Yeah. So basically, again, in summary, it was good effort, but they didn't have the follow through, and the follow through is what led to their demise. These things have to be extensively planned for.
There wasn't enough theoretical backing on what to do. What is to be done wasn't there.
All right, compañero Cruz, take it away.
Oh, you said so much though.
Yeah, you did. Let's unpack it for a second. I was going to say that Lumpy made a comment, and I want to highlight that comment, which is that, and it was going to actually be my book recommend, but that's fine. I'll give it to you guys early. Bukharin talks a lot in ABCs of Communism about banking systems under communism. I think that book, by the way, is a great resource for communists that want to understand more about what the plans were that were laid out and how planned out it was. It talks about so many aspects of the society that was attempting to be built. So that's a good example of the kind of plans that were laid and need to be laid before we can do the actionable, quote unquote, part of revolution.
Right.
It's all action, but I think you guys know what I mean by actionable.
I'll say one thing Ivan was saying, and I'll just kind of add a little phrase, there can be spontaneity within a plan. Right? You just can't try to make a plan out of spontaneity. It doesn't work well the other way, because you're going to constantly ask yourself, now what? Now what? What do we do? I don't know what to do. We took the ship. I don't know how to steer. What do we do? And you have to have that plan, and that goes beyond than just proletarian socialist revolutions, right? We can look back to bourgeois revolutions. Those also required plans. There's no spontaneous bourgeois revolution that took place that was successful in taking over some country and establishing capitalism in the first place.
Yeah. I think because I yapped a lot, and I'm just looking over our notes, Cruz. Why don't we talk about...
I'm looking at the notes going, okay, where do we...
Let's go past origins and history, but let's flip it. So talk about modern connections, what is needed for modern rev, and then I'll talk about bourgeois and Marxist revolution. We'll just switch them around.
Yeah, sure. So like when it comes to modern connections, we have more modern examples of attempted or theorized spontaneous revolutions. Back to France, we had the Mao Spontex in '68, which essentially came out of student rebellions, not even revolutions. They were essentially like, let's make a movement out of what the students are already doing. And the thought was that, one, you don't need a vanguard to actually lead the revolution and plan it. One will develop as a result of it. And two, it can kind of come from anywhere. It doesn't even have to just be the proletarian class. It could be the intellectuals. It could be, as they put it, it could have come from anywhere. And all they were going to do is sit there and kind of theorize, stay connected with the working class. And then when that pops off, then they go from there and figure out what they're going to do next, which obviously that movement died like 3 years after it was born. So similar success to the previous Paris Commune. And then in like more modern sense today, like what is needed, again, we see protests sparking up all around the world constantly. We see just over the not the summer, but the spring, we saw all the student rising up for Palestine. We saw protests taking place in Iran. None of those were revolutions by nature. There was no vanguard to actually lead them and go any farther. Even when students had taken buildings and barricaded, that was not dissimilar from the French student protests of '68 that led to the Mao Spontex movement in the first place. So what is still needed today is what was needed then: a proper vanguard party to be the theoretical lead in establishing socialism.
Right. I would say too, like what they need, and what we need from the proletariat, what we need from TikTok communists, is to, I've said this before, if you have the physical capability of getting on the streets and joining one of these organizations within the states, then you should do that. There's the three main ones in the States being the CPUSA, FRSL, and PSL. And I know the comments are going to go bananas because each one of them is revisionist, bullshit, whatever you guys think. But there's no need at this point to be making more parties, as opposed to principled communists should be going into those sectors and winning over those established parties and changing them. Especially when there's already infrastructure in those parties already exists, and countering government infiltration. So what also needs to happen is, if you can do this if you have a physical capability as well, but if you don't, but you do have access to computers and phones and stuff, is getting in on the propaganda game, being a principled communist, being knowledgeable in Marxist and Marxist theory, and contributing to this propaganda scheme we have going. Because right now, as I said earlier, the capitalists are allowing us to do this for now. And the more people we reach, the more influence that we will have. So it's also, I would say establishing your principles, learning what principles actually means. We were having a discussion about this the other day that I don't think a lot of people really know what it means. But having principles is something as, I'm going to say, simple as, if my best friend in the world says something racist, well, as a principled person, I'm opposed to racism. So you could be my best buddy, but in public, whatever, I will be like, hey bro, don't do that. Like that's not cool, but legitimately unpack that with that person, as opposed to being like, Jimmy John, he just says stuff like that. And now you extrapolate that even farther, being principled is not supporting Kamala Harris right now just because she's, girl bossing her way into capitalism. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to know what you stand for and stand for it.
I want to jump in real quick and address something in the comments. So when we're going to, before we start attacking the works of people that had successful representation of communist plans and based on later things that they did or allegedly did. Let's look at our own behaviors, because it's very, people bring in these very, I'm going to call them lib attacks on authors that are communist from within our own community. And ironically, these tend to be people who themselves probably need to do some reflection. So just going to call that out. Anyway, keep going.
Some unpacking of bigotry. Yeah, I get it. So when it comes to revolutionary struggle, right? Like we have, like I said, we kind of flipped over our program here for a second, but we have, so like when it comes to revolutionary struggle and revolutions in general, like we always talk about the counter revolution. So basically, like, again, taking the definition of revolution and being great change, when the great societal change is occurring, moving society to a socialist means, there will be a counter to that change, attempting to bring it back even farther to the right than society already was at. But revolutions aren't necessarily, revolution is not, what's the word I'm looking for? Exclusive to socialist thought. So one of our first podcast episodes we talked about bourgeois versus proletariat revolution. So the American Revolution was a bourgeois revolution. What makes a bourgeois is that the leaders of the American Revolution, Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton, all these goobers, were from affluent families for the most part, slave-owning families. And the precipice of the American Revolution, of the patriotic revolution, was because England was moving away from a economy based off slavery and could not finance its continued expansion and wars into North America, into Native American territories. So the colonists, much like how we're seeing in Palestine today, with Israeli colonists, is colonists were going out into native territories unsponsored and just claiming territory, wiping out people, starting wars with the already established nations in North America, and they were being protected by the colonies and big business owners and such. So England, ultra super mega giga rare W, was like, hey, stop doing that. Like I mean, they didn't have good intention. They didn't care about Native Americans, but it was basically like, we cannot protect you guys from retaliation. So when the Americans, the colonists, were basically talking about stuff like taxation without representation, not only are they talking about England taking money from the colonial heads to finance their country, they're also discussing how, well, we're here in Virginia and we want to go out west, but you're not letting us go out west. And what do they want to do out west? They want to kill people and take over more land and territory. So that's why this notion of patriotism also contributes to this idea of bourgeois revolution, that these leaders, in this case, were seeking what? They are seeking money, they're seeking fame, into interdependence in order to continue oppressing people, in order to continue slavery. That's a bourgeois revolution. You could even say, in a way, not exactly, in a way that the mustache man's political party taking over or winning power in Germany, to an extent, was a bourgeois revolution, because they essentially were coercing the bourgeois into supporting them, and the bourgeois and the liberals went for it in order to build the continued sense of security. So if a revolutionary is not talking about and actions aren't representative of the abolition of the class antagonisms I mentioned before, then it is not a proletariat revolution, it is a bourgeois revolution. All right. Contradictions in or within Marxist-Leninism. Why is spontaneous revolution a problem? I feel like we kind of covered it. Do you want to say anything about that?
I don't necessarily have anything additional to add. Outside of that, it's like inherently Marxism-Leninism is all about analyzing the material conditions, not only globally, but locally, more importantly, locally, and then planning accordingly to deal with said material conditions in your region, your country, your continent, whatever, however far this plan goes, right? And the idea behind spontaneous revolution just it doesn't work with that. Like you can't spontaneously fall into a plan.
Right. I think that too. Part of the benefit of learning dialectical materialism is that it trains you to think in a more disciplined and pragmatic way.
Yeah.
Broadly, so that in any situation that requires action, you sort of learn to default to planning, right? As opposed to being more impulsive and more individualist. Because I would argue that, spontaneous revolution is very individualist because it's coming from the individual impulse to want to act, and it's not tempered with the overall understanding of the material conditions and how the impulse that, although it may be a group, the impulse that drives that group might be individualist, and how that can actually be harmful.
It's definitely like a topic that needs to be talked about, especially because like I feel like everyone, when they first kind of awaken, right?
Yeah.
For lack of a better way to put it. One of the first thoughts I feel as though every single person has had is like, oh, well, if this is how it is, let's do something about it. Let's just go. We could take it. We can do this. And it's only through either attempting it and failing miserably, or just taking a second and reading, the theory that came from the past attempts and things like that, and learning about dialectical materialism, that you kind of get out of that. So us talking about it now and in this fashion is essentially directed to baby leftists. Like, hey, I know what you're thinking. I know where your head's at. Let's get you past that.
Yeah. All right, so that's actually a really good transition into government infiltration. So how do I navigate this one? So this is why operational security is so important. And this is why, if you choose to come into the collective Discord, we made a little nice video that a lot of people didn't like about basically when you learn to shut your mouth. Because
I will not be silenced.
I think to a lot of people, a lot of TikTok communists, this is a game for y'all, and it's a hobby. And you don't understand that I'm going to mean here, but your actions have consequences. Your words have consequences. Like, you can't just say whatever the hell you want without assuming that everything is being listened to and recorded. I have one camera here. I have one camera here. And I have a Bluetooth. Everything I'm saying is being recorded right now. I know that because we take the recording off of TikTok and put it on YouTube. You know what I mean? So your
right.
Phones, your Bluetooth, your speakers, your Discords, your YouTube comments, your whatever you're searching up when you hit Control N on your computer is being recorded and monitored, not by a person, but by an algorithm. You have to understand that. So
sorry.
No, it's okay. So when you are in these spaces and you're like, LOL, why don't we just blow up a gas station? It's like how you treat a firearm, right? If someone ever hands you a firearm, what is the first thing you do? You point it in a safe direction and you make sure that you check if it's loaded or it's unloaded, right? You do that even if your buddy just did it and they hand it to you, you do it anyway because you're training your brain to do that. Because it only takes one fuck up for something terrible to happen. So the same thing applies in communist spaces in real life and online. It only takes one fuck up for one Fed to be in an area that they're not supposed to be in to get you and all of your homies. and you've essentially fucked everything up. So that being said, one, information is always need to know. You're not the guy. I'm not the guy. You're not the guy. Like,
I might be the guy.
Cruz might be the guy. So I'm not going to tell you if he is or not because like the El Presidente of the party is not going to tell you personally all the great plans and schemes they have cooking, right? Because let's talk about hierarchy. You're not a guy to know the information. So if you're ever in these spaces, whether again it's an online meeting or a PSL meeting, CPSU, whatever meeting, and if anyone ever approaches you and it's like, hey, we should totally do some illegal stuff. That's a cop, bro.
Right.
That's a cop. Like, just, you don't even have to say anything dumb. I mean, you should report them to your cadre, but like, that's a cop. Get out. Like, no. So that being said, this is how the government, basically, what they do to infiltrate, spaces, what they do to try to get you in legal trouble, because they might not be able to put you in jail for advocating for revolutionary struggle. But if your new friends you met at the meeting is like, drive my car across state lines, and it turns out there's some illicit material in the trunk, and then you get pulled over conveniently, that's what they'll get you on. They'll get you on bullshit, and that's the plan. So
I wanted to add something to
and
this.
I want to.
So go ahead.
I just want to comment on this comment down here. Not me trying to organize everyone and anyone. You gotta vet people, bro. No, you can't just keep the door open. But go ahead.
So it's just a reminder that the Communist Control Act of 1954, as far as I know, is either still active, but communism is still considered technically an illegal thing. And I think that there are a lot of people who don't understand that while those things aren't publicly necessarily, although I would argue that they are already being addressed, we are being looked at. And as things start to move further in that direction, the things you are going to be looked at can and will be used against you in a legal sense. So even in the sense of like understanding the risks that you're taking and really weighing that through, that's the reason we're always talking about principle. That's the reason we're talking about spontaneous revolution, is because you can call yourself a communist, you can call yourself a leftist, or however you choose to term it, but you need to understand what comes along with that.
Absolutely right. And so one thing I want to add to the OPSEC discussion, right? And it all ties back into spontaneity and how the bourgeois class kind of relies, and more specifically the FBI utilizes that spontaneous individualistic actions in our, I think it was the second episode of Re-Education where we talked about anarchism.
Yeah, it was the second one, I believe.
And within that episode, we discussed how, I believe we discussed like this article that had talked about how the FBI almost relies on anarchists within movements and it's because of that spontaneous nature, that desire to do something, right? Some tangible thing, because you feel like, but without any kind of plan of what to do after that, all it does is endanger the movement and the people involved.
I want to elaborate on that real quick, because I'm not sure if this is what you mean, Cruz, but when I hear that, I'm not just thinking about people who call themselves anarchists. I'm thinking about people who act in anarchist ways. That's why we need to understand what these things mean.
Yeah, words are important.
Right.
Definitions are important. There's a reason. Right. I know it seems kind of tedious because it's on, like, every day I feel like I'm reading about a new like movement that I hadn't ever heard of, but it's like where these come from places, and it's because of these different branching thoughts that come about in the process of one, getting to the stage where you can start building socialist society, but then in the midst of actually building socialist society, and things just are going to keep branching off and being separate. Some things work, some things don't. Spontaneity does not.
I thought you were going to say your.
Yeah, I thought you were going somewhere.
Yeah, I think
I was just saying
the largest goal that this project Reeducation has is to affect and impress upon people the importance of understanding that discipline and principles are something you have to learn, because we're not really taught that. We're taught the capitalist idea of what discipline is, which is, essentially a type of bootstrapping. We're not taught what it means to be principled in terms of vetting the people that we're speaking to, thinking about what we're saying, thinking about the fact that we're always being observed. We're not taught that. We're taught to kind of do whatever we feel, and that our own quote unquote freedom is the most important thing. And, we all know, hopefully, that's cap. You know what I mean? That's for TJ. But I think a lot of us kind of get lost in the in-between, where we're like, well, aren't we all working towards the same cause? I don't know about you, but I don't consider everybody that I meet a comrade. And when I say a comrade, I mean someone that I can trust and I feel is principled and handles things in a principled manner. And I don't think we should do that. I mean, we're not hippies. We don't need to be joining up with everybody we meet. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but
no, it's all good. Madame Showrunner, we have a meeting with a homie in a couple minutes. Do you feel like we touched on enough, or do you want us to keep going?
We can always do a secondary episode to this and follow up if we need to.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the rest of the notes, and a lot of it is stuff we've already talked about, like government infiltration. There's stuff about different parties and stuff, but I feel like that is a little bit more of a departure, like New People's Army, Indian Maoists, the EFP. I feel like that by itself can be its own episode. Specific theory. We can do recommendations.
Well, yeah, I would like to talk about media recommendations you two have. I've already said that my recommendation is ABCs of Communism. I do recommend, even if you have issues with some of Bukharin's history as an individual, that you do take a look at that book. It's very comprehensive, and it's explained in a very approachable way. So that's my recommendation. What do you have, Ivan?
So I have something that is not a piece of theory, but because I took that lit personally when you said we didn't have to. So I have, unironically, I have Les Mis, or Les Miserables.
Okay.
Either the musical and or the book, preferably the book, particularly because the book is loosely based off the Green Revolution that occurred in France against the monarchy. And it's a classic example. Hello, Josh. He's here because we're talking about this instead of being in the meeting. Yes, Cutie. I'm talking about Les Mis, and the reason why I'm talking about it is because in that media, these young guys decide, literally drinking at the bar, which is why I brought it up in the beginning, that they're going to overthrow the monarchy. And they're like, fuck it, man, let's do it. And then they try to do it, and they get mollywopped. I mean, they get brutalized. Not only do they get brutalized, but like the whole city gets set on fire.
It is awful.
Yeah, don't worry about it, Josh. I was just teasing you. But I was just saying that basically the French soldiers show up and they just start blasting people, killing innocent people. Like a bunch of collateral damage happens, and basically it goes nowhere. And we can only they get asked to sing a song about having red and black flag. Bro, you're right. I totally forgot about that. But basically what happens is they get mollywopped, and you can ascertain that the monarchy will continue its reign even more brutally moving forward. So if you and your anarchist tendencies friends are ever in the club and you're like, let's just do it, bro, watch Les Mis, because that's going to be you guys.
Yeah, sober up first and then revisit that thought.
Right.
Don't do anything stupid.
Read some theory.
Read some theory, cool off a bit.
Go to brunch and read some theory, bro.
What's your book recommend, Keith Cruz?
I'm gonna recommend something that I was reading yesterday when I was kind of researching a bit on this, and I had brought it up earlier, the Mouse Spontex, which was essentially the one that happened in Paris in '68, and I was reading through an interview with someone that had essentially kind of loosely orchestrated it, right? And it's an interesting read to see how that thought process led to failure.
Not him just dipping. Well, on that note, should we wait like a couple minutes?
Wait,
All right, go on.
Wait, what happened?
I don't know.
I was pulling up the name.
I don't know.
Yeah, you can't
You can't AFK.
change tabs, bro.
Don't say that, Nelson.
Is he saying some goofy stuff?
Yeah.
Investigation into Maoists in France. It's from 1971. It's about the Mouse Spontex movement.
All right.
More or less a spontaneous attempt.
Well, those are your book recommends. Magoom's also recommended a book. Just want to throw it out there because I read it. I haven't read the book, but I read their comment. If We Burn by Vincent Bevins. Haven't read it. Thank you, everybody, for always supporting us, and we'll continue on these topics.
All right, homies.
Next week will be Ghost of Revolution. Check us out on the YouTube. Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.